So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends on where you are in the world now. So today we are here to attend the talk by Professor Rabia Yazicigil. She's from Boston University, and the talk is "The Future is Now, ASICs for Biosensing and Wireless Communication." But we are here today to attend the talk by Rabia. So Rabia is currently assistant professor of ECE department at Boston University, a visiting scholar at MIT, and the network faculty in Sabans University. She was a postdoctoral associate at MIT and received her PhD degree from Columbia University in 2016. Her research interest lies on the interface of integrated circuit, signal processing, security, biosensing, and wireless communications to innovate system-level solution for future energy constraint application. She has received numerous awards, including the Catalyst Foundation Award 2021, Boston University Engineer Dean Catalyst Award 2021, Electrical Engineering Collaboration Research Award for her PhD research 2016, second place at Bell Labs Future X Days Student Research Competition 2015, 2014 Milmont Teaching Assistant Award of Columbia University. She recently served as the vice chair of the Rising Stars 2020 workshop at the IEEE International Solid State Circuits Conference, and she's a member of the 2015 MIT ECS Rising Stars cohort. She is a member of the IEEE International Symposium Sequencing System, RFIC, and the ASIC Technical Program Committee. She served as an associate editor of the IEEE Transactions on Sequencing System 1 and on the IEEE Council for FID Advisory Committee as a solid-state circuit society representative. Dr. Yazicigil, I don't know if I'm spelling correctly your name, is a senior member of the IEEE and an active member of the Solid-State Circuit Society Women in Circuits Committee from 2016 to now. So thank you very much, Rabia, for accepting our invitation. And the floor is with you to start your presentation.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I look forward to discussing my work with everyone. Thank you everyone for joining. Today we're going to talk about ASICs for biosensing and wireless communications. My group, Wireless Integrated Systems and Extreme Circuits Lab, is developing cyber-secure biological systems. These are living sensors built from engineered biological systems, and they're augmented with solid-state circuits. So these systems combine the benefits of biology with the reliable data generation and communication infrastructures of electronics. We are also developing all-in-one data decoders that you're seeing on the right side, leveraging novel crosshair techniques from algorithms to low-power integrated circuits to enable energy-efficient and low-latency wireless communications that are essential for many applications. And lastly, we are also investigating analog and radio frequency physical layer security techniques for these type of resource-constrained systems that go beyond the traditional cryptography-based approaches. For the first half of the talk, we will discuss bioelectronics for disease diagnosis, and then we will switch gears and talk about communication systems and coding theory. Even though these are very different application areas with unique system requirements, the underlying idea of this talk is actually to convince you that we need custom integrated circuits to make these technologies and science possible. Here you see the chips that are recently designed by my group for ingestible bioelectronics and universal decoding that we will talk about in this talk. Now we are going to take a deep dive into our first project on ingestible capsules for disease diagnosis and monitoring. This work is in collaboration with Tim Liu from MIT Biological Engineering Department. with Giovanni Traverso from MIT Mechanical Engineering Department, and also a gastroenterologist at BWH, Harvard Medical School, and also their groups. And this work has been funded by Helmsley Charitable Trust and Catalyst Foundation in the last couple of years. Traditionally, if you think about inflammation diagnosis in our gastrointestinal tract, that requires an expert evaluation using images gathered from endoscopy. This is a very invasive process, and patients can only do these measurements a few times per year. That prevents real-time monitoring of the patient. An alternative approach is to actually perform biomarker testing on stool samples that you're seeing in the middle on the slide, which is cheaper and non-invasive. However, some of the essential biomarkers that is used for disease diagnosis actually break down within the digestive system, making this method non-ideal. Recent technologies such as PillCam can provide non-invasive and real-time monitoring of our GI tract. However, this technology is image-based, similar to endoscopy. So none of these methods can actually directly measure the molecular biomarkers of disease in situ and localize the inflammation. Our goal is to develop a non-invasive sensing system for real-time monitoring of gastrointestinal conditions, utilizing direct sensing of disease-mediating molecules at point of care. Further, we want to measure these short-lived labile molecules before they degrade within the digestive system and localize the inflammation. So to do this, we built an ingestible biosensor, allowing real-time monitoring and leading to improved health outcomes and better knowledge about disease processes. Achieving this non-invasive and continuous monitoring of the GI tract requires an interface to sense and transduce the signals from chemical domain into electrical domain, where they can be easily processed, stored, and shared. And synthetic biology can provide this required interface. So we are using genetically engineered biosensors to detect and analyze associated with human health with high sensitivity and specificity in a non-invasive manner. And if you tune the sensitivity of each biosensor, this will result in different activation thresholds that are actually optimized at a physiologically relevant concentration of biomarkers, low, medium, and high. In the future, this can actually be utilized as a disease stage detector. These genetically engineered biosensors can sense a number of analytes, such as antibiotics, sugar, nitric oxide, and blood. And there are a number of different mechanisms to detect whether these whole cell reporters have sensed their target or not. And the most common ones are colorimetric, fluorescence, and luminescence readout. Out of these, we are actually using luminescence because luminescence stands out as the most appropriate choice for low power and low cost ingestible capsules because it actually does not require light source. It instead relies on the cells to generate and transmit their own light. So my group develops fully integrated circuits that are interfacing with this genetically engineered bacterial sensors. Here you're seeing our ingestible capsule. So there are two by two array of channels that are filled with bacterial biosensors. And when these bacterial biosensors sense their target biomarker, they produce a light signal, bioluminescence signal, that is detected by the CMOS chip that's custom designed to actually process this weak bioluminescence signal and wirelessly communicate the process data out of the body to a cell phone. And achieving this with high sensitivity, tiny form factor, and extremely low power is the challenges that we address from the electronic side. And here you're seeing an image of our custom chip. And also you're seeing the capsule right next to a chickpea to give you an idea about the size. I actually have the capsule right here also in my hand. It's a small, tiny capsule. It's close to a size of a blueberry as well. So before we go into details about how this capsule works, let's first take a look at some of the current methods to detect luminescence. One common way is actually to use a commercial plate reader technology, which is a big desktop machine that consumes watt level power, and you plug that machine into the wall. These plate readers are actually highly accurate devices that are providing good measurements in the biology labs, but they are not actually for point of care diagnostics. So our goal is to have a tiny, low cost and low power sensing device for easier and at home diagnosis. There's been previous research that showed luminescence readout using integrated photodetectors, but these solutions typically consume milliwatt level power, which is requiring a large battery and limiting the miniaturization. Recent research demonstrated luminescence readout with lower power in the nanowatt level, but the state-of-the-art solutions with very low power did not integrate the photodetectors, which is actually one of the challenging parts of this design because that's the interface between biology and electronics. So latest research in this area demonstrated centimeter scale capsules. For example, I have one of them actually in my hand that's developed by some of our collaborators on this project. It's a 3 centimeter by a 1 centimeter capsule. That's pretty large for anyone to swallow, so it's not really safe to use that for disease diagnosis and monitoring. I don't think I really need to convince you why we need to miniaturize a capsule, but let me actually show you some data. The risk of device retention and obstruction of the GI tract due to these ingestible devices are directly linked to the size and also the form factor of the capsule. Device retention of the conventional capsule endoscope, PillCam, in centimeter scale typically happens at a rate of 1.4% for healthy people, and it goes up to 8% for patients with inflammatory bowel disease. That's actually a very, that could lead to very critical medical emergencies. Here on this slide, on the right side, you are seeing different capsules in the scale. And on the top is the capsule that I just showed you that demonstrates nanowatt level bioluminescence sensing. Right below that is the PillCam, which actually has a high retention rate of 1.4%. And then on the other hand, you're seeing also smaller millimeter scale round-shaped drug delivery systems similar to ProCardio XL that report much fewer cases of obstruction in billion of users. So in this case, for ProCardio XL, they reported 85 out of 4.4 billion users. So in our ingestible capsule design, we target millimeter scale ProCardio XL form factor for easy and safe use. You are seeing our capsule at the bottom of the slide, right next to actually a quarter this time, just to give you, again, the idea about the form factor. So we envision that the future luminescence readout systems should be in millimeter scale with multiplex measurement capability so that they could detect different disease biomarkers simultaneously while achieving nanowatt level power consumption. And this ultra low power consumption could actually allow the device to be self-powered in situ by harvesting the energy available in the environment. A key challenge is designing sensitive electronics to measure and wirelessly communicate this weak signaling from the bacterial cells while maintaining a tight energy budget and a small form factor. So in this work, we provide a scalable biomarker detection for a multi-diagnostic capsule using integrated custom CMOS photodiodes, and we also achieve high resolution and nanowatt level power consumption through hardware techniques, namely threshold-based bioluminescence detection and dual deep cycling front end, which we will talk about next. And again, you're also seeing an image of our chip that's fabricated in 65 nanometer CMOS technology. Here is the top level architecture. I'm not going to go into the details, but I want to highlight a few things here. So our chip consists of a threshold-based bioluminescence detection circuit that interfaces with these genetically engineered biosensors. These are stored in these chambers. There are 4 chambers. And when they shine a light, CMOS integrated custom photodiodes with high sensitivity will detect this light And then we have a processing circuit that actually encodes this detected biomarker level in time information. And then this processing circuit is followed by a time to digital converter that output counts that quantifies the light level produced by the biosensors when they interact or bind with the biomarkers. So the system outputs a larger number of counts when the detected biomarker level is higher. We also have additional components for on-chip power management, wake-up, and timing control circuits to provide all of the necessary clock signals and supply voltages for a fully self-sustained system. So if you think about biological activity, typically interesting things happen in the biology in the order of minutes to hours, versus the electronics can actually operate very fast at gigahertz speed. So by leveraging these time constant differences between biology and electronics, we utilize a dual duty cycling scheme to enable significant power reduction in this system. You're seeing actually a timeline of the capsule traveling through the body in one day. And the first level of duty cycling is actually to keep most of the system blocks in sleep mode and only wake them up when measurements are needed, which happens, let's say, every 10 minutes in this example, while the capsule transits through the GI tract for 24 hours. And then the second level of duty cycling activates the most power-hungry electronic circuits, such as the wireless transmission, only during a brief period of, let's say, in this case, in this example for 12 milliseconds, after processing the signals for 16 seconds in the ultra-low power mode. And all of these timings are actually designed to be programmable for a flexible interface with the biological signals. And for this capsule, we performed in vitro measurements. You're seeing here on the top left side actually how the capsule is encapsulated in a 3D printed capsule that's designed by our collaborators, by Professor Giovanni Traverso's group. And for these measurements, we placed the capsule in a beaker, glass beaker, that is containing LB media. That's actually a nutritionally rich media used for the growth of bacteria. And then you're seeing the images of our test setup, and we are communicating wirelessly with the receivers, with the computer in this case, that can be replaced, of course, by your cell phone too. For the in vitro experiments, we have a 2x2 array of biosensors, and each of these sensors are 1 microliter of sensors that are placed on top of different channels. We have 2 independent replica of tetrathionate sensors. And we also have a channel of null sensor, meaning that this is just used for control. It doesn't produce any bioluminescence signal. And we have a channel 2, which is a reference channel that's used for calibrating the offsets due to temperature changes or any type of variations in the channel. And in our measurements, we add 100 millimolar of tetrathionate as an intestinal inflammation biomarker. After 3 hours of exposure to tetrathionate, you are seeing on this graph channel 0 and channel 3, which are actually the tetrathionate sensors. They detect the bioluminescence signal that's illuminated from the sensor cells, and they report a maximum of 180 femtoamp of photocurrent. While the channel 1, the null sensor, that's a negative channel, that's set by the system noise. So it's not responding to the tetrathionate molecules in the medium. And here you're seeing that this is actually kind of like a binary classifier in a diagnostic setting. It's telling you if the biomarker present or not. Not just that, we also conducted in vivo experiments when the ingestible capsule is actually placed in the intestine of a pig. After opening the abdominal cavity, we placed the device through a small incision directly into the lumen of the pig's small intestine, and we divided the small intestine into compartments with clamps. And these intestinal compartments were kept inside the abdomen at 37 degrees, and the wireless signals are transmitted from inside the abdomen to a cell phone. That's for the wireless reception part. For the in vivo experiments, again, in these two compartments, we had two independent devices, and we injected 100 millimolar of tetrathionate into one of the compartments, and the other one was only having a buffer that was added as a control in the other compartment. You're seeing actually the measurement set up here. And you're also seeing the kinetics of the TT sensor that's embedded in the abdominal cavity of a pig. So as you can see, we are able to detect the tetrathionate that's clearly distinguishable from the device in the compartment with the buffer control. Dark lines actually represent the mean of independent experiments using different pigs with up to 2 to 3 devices in separate compartments. And then we have the shading that represents the standard error magnitude. And you're seeing on the bottom right curve the receiver operating characteristic of the device sensing over time. So this device reaches to a sensitivity and specificity of 100% at 120 minutes. So what is this experiment is showing? This is telling us that the miniaturized device can detect small amounts of analyte in the harsh intestinal environment with high specificity and sensitivity. Just to summarize, in this work, we demonstrated a fully integrated luminescence detector achieving high sensitivity with nanowatt level power consumption. This detector is used for minimally invasive multiplex biomarker detection via a millimeter scale ingestible capsule in the GI tract for disease diagnosis and monitoring. And the chip actually achieves a much lower minimum detectable signal with higher resolution while achieving a 6.4 times smaller volume compared to state of the art. And it only consumes 59 nanowatt of active power consumption for the custom integrated photodetector readout. So what's next in this project? For the first prototype, even though we designed our custom photodetectors and the luminescence readout chip, we actually utilize commercial transmitters for the wireless communication part, which actually still consumes higher power than the custom designs. So that can be addressed by designing a custom fully integrated wireless transmitter together with the luminescence readout system. On top of that, we're also currently addressing the security of these connected ingestible sensors, given their tight resource constraints in terms of size, in terms of energy. So we are looking at how do we embed security in the physical layer using low power custom hardware solutions. And as I mentioned, these type of cyber secure biological systems that consist of biological sensors augmented with integrated circuits are not only useful for disease diagnosis and monitoring, but they're also useful for environmental monitoring. So another application area we are working on for these type of sensors actually to do real-time monitoring of toxic chemicals in the wastewater. So we're trying to achieve distributed wastewater surveillance by creating a wireless biosensor network for low-cost detection and fast and scalable analysis with our collaborators from Boston University with Professor Douglas Densmore, Professor Mo Khalil, and Professor Wilson Wong. So now we are going to switch gears and actually talk about another custom integrated hardware design to achieve energy efficient and low latency universal decoding and communication systems. We call this project GRAND, which stands for Guessing Random Additive Noise Decoding. And we're going to discuss in detail what does decoding mean, how does this project works, and why it is universal. And this work is in collaboration with Professor Muriel Medard from MIT and Professor Ken Duffy from Northeastern University. And the US side of this project is supported by DARPA for the funding. So what is information encoding and decoding? So for example, I'm giving an example from a different field here, but if you think about the person on the left, person A has thoughts or neurological signals that's actually encoded into the language that they speak. Let's say for this case, it's English. And then we talk, our information is being sent through the medium of air, by using pressure waves, and then that information is received by person B. Our ears act like the receivers, and our brain acts as the decoder, which converts that language to neurological signals. Let's say that when I'm speaking, even if I make a mistake while speaking English, or you did not hear the entire sentence that I was telling due to the noise in the background, hopefully you can still decode my message from the context of the information. So let's say that if I say cat, but you heard it as bat, you won't be able to decode. But if I say cat and meow, and then if you hear as bat and meow, hopefully you can extract the right information from the context, from the meow part, that I was actually saying cat, not bat. So we also have a similar scheme used in digital information exchange, which could be the paragraphs in your email or 3D graphics in a virtual reality environment. So for reliable information storage and transmission, we typically encode the data by adding redundancy, which is similar to the context in speech, similar to the meow that we attach to cat. So even though we have redundancy, received information might still be different from the original information due to the noise in the communication channel. And decoding is the process of detecting and removing these errors. We have error detecting codes that allow the data integrity to be efficiently tested. Additionally, we have error correcting codes that actually allow the errors to be fixed through the use of specific decoding algorithms. Here on the right side, you are seeing an illustration of our actual chip layout with all the tangled information going in for decoding of the actual message. So now let's take a look at the standard paradigm. Let me ask this question. What languages do the information theorists speak? They call them codes rather than languages, and they construct dictionaries called code books to search for the correct information in that dictionary. In 1948, Shannon told us that the best error correction performance comes at longer code lengths. And then in 1978, Berdekamp, Mekles, and Tilburg established that optimally accurate decoding of linear codes is actually MP-complete in code length. So there is no optimally accurate universal decoder at long code lengths. Since then, the engineering paradigm is actually to perform error correction by co-designing restrictive coding schemes with distinct code-specific decoders. So there's a specific decoder for each coding scheme. You're seeing on the slide for different coding schemes, what are the decoders? And there's even actually the cases like the random linear codes that there isn't even any practical decoder that exists. Since the design of conventional decoders is actually tightly coupled to the code structure, you can think of this as like you need a distinct implementation for each code. So there's a bunch of actually multiple chips that are shown on the slide to support different coding schemes. So this either leads to increased hardware complexity in silicon area to decode various codes, or you have to have restrictive code standardization to limit the hardware footprint. Just as an example, for 5G new radio, for example, there are two coding schemes that are proposed. Low density parity checks that were invented in 1960s for all data communications, and CA polar codes from 2010s for all control channel communications. So what does GRAND do? It takes your puddle of chips and it replaces it with a single small footprint chip that can decode any moderate redundancy code with optimal accuracy. So this means that no matter what code you wish to use, you can decode them all with optimal accuracy using a single chip. even the ones that you were not able to decode before, which is, for example, random linear codes. As an analogy to our example, it means it doesn't matter what language you speak anymore, so the other person can always understand what you're saying, and you don't need standardization because you don't need to agree in advance what code you are going to communicate with. This makes the device to be future-proof. So if there's a new code for a new application, you don't have to change your device anymore. Let's take a look at how does the grand algorithm works by guessing noise for maximum likelihood decoding. In this case, we have a transmitted code word X that's altered by noise E, and the received code word Y is equal to X plus E. If you have a code-centric decoder, it will identify X directly from Y by using a decoding algorithm that's specific to the codebook structure. So they use the codebook structure, the hash structure, to try and guess what was transmitted, what was stored or communicated based on what was received. On the other hand, grand algorithm that was invented by my collaborators, Professor Muriel Medard and Professor Ken Duffy, follows a simple algorithm for noise guessing to decode X rather than identifying X directly from Y. It is agnostic to the code structure, as the aim is to actually identify the noise effect that impacted the data, and we only use the code book for what it is, as just like a hash of that data. And given that the noise in the communication channel is not dependent on your codebook structure, that makes the decoder universal. First step is to check the codebook membership by computing the syndrome of the received code word Y by using a parity check matrix H without any pre-stored lookup tables. If the received code word is error-free, then the product HY is 0. So the codebook membership check is satisfied. If there's an error, the next step is actually for the decoder is to rank order all possible noise effect sequences from most likely to least likely. And then it forms a difference between the received code word Y and the current most likely noise effect sequence E. And we use the resultant bit string to check for if that satisfies the codebook membership by querying the codebook. And this process is repeated until a code word is found. And independent from the codebook construction, the first instance that the codebook membership check is satisfied actually corresponds to maximum likelihood decoding, making the method universal. Now we are going to take a look at and talk about the architectural details and design decisions for this universal decoder using grand algorithm. For maximum likelihood decoding, we need to generate the noise guesses in the decreasing order of likelihood of their occurrence. So we assume in this case, we are starting in this talk, we're only looking at the hard detection scenario. So we are assuming the channel to be binary symmetric channel. And in a binary symmetric channel, the likelihood of error follows the increasing order of Hamming weights from 0 bit, 1, 2, 3, and 4 bits, let's say. So the most likely thing is that there's a 0-bit flip, which means that there was no error in the received code word. The next likely error is 1-bit error, and then 2-bit, and then so on. So the probability of an error for a given Hamming weight is dependent on the bit error rate of the channel. You are seeing actually on the slide a table that shows the probability of an error with a higher Hamming weight actually decreases significantly as the channel noise condition improves. So if you go from 10 to the minus 3 to the 10 to the minus 5, it's not very likely to have about 3-bit flips. So in our case, the error generator will create guessed noise sequences from most likely to least likely by following this Hamming weight order, which means that it will follow the increasing order of Hamming weights sequentially to achieve maximum likelihood decoding. So once the syndrome check fails, as I mentioned, we're going to activate the error generator to generate these noise sequences. In our work, we are generating 1, 2, and 3-bit errors. And then every time when there's a sequence that's generated, we multiply that with the parity check matrix H to compute the product HE. And the error generator block compares this product HE with HY. So if the HE and HY are equal to each other, then that means that you found the right error sequence. So that way you are actually done with decoding. If you don't find, you go to the next error sequence and so on. So actually this decoder has an abandonment threshold. So we abandon after 3-bit checks, because if we go back to the slide here, even for a noisy channel, for a bit error rate of 10 to minus 3, you see that having a 3-bit flip is not a very highly likely condition. So we only search up the 3-bit flips, and after that, we actually abandon, saying that report a failure to decode. So if we think about the error generator, you have to make a certain number of queries, right? So the number of queries for a given Hamming weight is given as n choose I. Assuming that, let's say, you're doing 1 query per cycle, the worst case latency will be dominated by a 3-bit search. So if your error generator is searching through 3-bit check, the system will actually stall until you are finding the code word, or the error generator abandons the search. And that will impact the throughput of the system. So to have a higher throughput, we split our error generator into a primary error generator for 1 and 2-bit flip search, and a secondary error generator for 3-bit search. Each stage operates independently. So we have a syndrome block that checks for if the codebook membership check is satisfied for 0-bit flips. And then the secondary error generator is searching through 3-bit flips, primary is searching for 1 and 2-bit flips. And leveraging this 3-stage pipeline architecture in the chip actually increases the throughput of the system by roughly 1.7 times at a bit error rate of 10 to the minus 3. And another technique we utilize in the error generator design is actually to leverage the noisy channel statistics. What does it mean? So if you look at the measured power consumption of each block, you're seeing it on the pie chart that if you look at the syndrome, which is the blue, and then we have the primary generator orange, and the secondary generator is the yellow part, you see that the secondary generator consumes most of the power. If you have all the blocks active at all times during the decoding process, the system average power will be dominated by the secondary error generator. And if you remember, we just looked at the probability of each bit flip in a binary symmetric channel indicates that error search for a higher Hamming weight is less likely. Right, so this indicates that average active time of the block is also changing with that. So secondary error generator will be active for less than 0.03% of the decoding process when the bit error rate is 10 to the minus 3. Similarly, at this bit error rate, the primary is active for less than 12% of the decoding process. So in our design, we leverage these channel noise statistics, and we dynamically clock gate the blocks to reduce the average power consumption. So the primary generator and secondary generator will be in sleep mode unless a code word is passed into their input FIFO from the previous stage. So that means that the average power consumption of the system approaches to the power consumption of the syndrome block as the channel noise condition improves. So depending on the channel noise conditions, the system will adjust the average power consumption. And this actually allows us to reduce or improve the power savings of by 8.6 times for a bit error rate of 10 to the minus 3 compared to not using this dynamic clock gating. Here you're seeing our overall architecture, which has the syndrome, primary, and secondary generator. And we are searching through the errors to find. And as I mentioned, we abandon after 3-bit flip check. And of course, given that now each block is processing independently, we also have a tag-based reordering scheme. It's a simple scheme that allows you to reorder the code words that are coming out of this architecture. And to emphasize again, we use dynamic clock gating of the error generators based on the probability of error likelihood. So another hardware technique that I want to highlight here is actually leveraging the sparsity of noise sequences. If you think about it, so you have to compute for each noise sequence, you have to compute HE, the product of parity check metrics, with your guessed error sequence. And you want to do this with low latency. You don't want to spend so much time for each error sequence. So here we actually utilize the sparsity of the error sequence. What do I mean by that? If you think about a code length of, let's say, 128, we are searching up to 3-bit flips. That means that 3 non-zero entries in my error vector. So that makes the error vector to be sparse, and we use that to actually select the H matrix columns, and then we XOR them to get the product of HE in a single cycle. So we are able to do very low latency HE product calculation by utilizing the sparsity of the noise sequences. And lastly, as another hardware technique, for our universal decoder, we actually leverage code interleaving. So we want to be able to demonstrate or use this hardware architecture with more than one codebook, right? The idea of universality is to be able to switch the codebook on the fly. So we designed a code interleaved architecture, like a ping pong scheme, that allows actually the seamless decoding of code words and switching to a new codebook without any dead zone. And to achieve this, we actually have 2 SRAMs that store distinct codebooks. And while you are loading a new H matrix for a new codebook, you are actually continuing the decoding of the code words by using the other path. And this actually dynamic re-randomization of the codebook using this code interleaved architecture also provides actually an additional layer of security, which I'm not going to go into details of that in this talk. Here you're seeing that code interleaved operation. While you're loading into one of the SRAMs, you're using the other one for the decoding, so that is allowing you to not have any dead zone in the decoding. Now, I would like to highlight a few of our measurement results for this project and also show the comparison with the state of the art. So we implemented this grand chip in 40 nanometer CMOS technology. You are seeing the measurement setup here that's used for this chip testing. And here you're seeing the measurement results for the universality of the decoding performance. So what does it mean? So we are looking at block error rate measurements, and we're comparing our grand decoder performance with standard decoders on the left side for Reed-Muller and also BCH code. As shown on the left side, the grand decoder chip actually has competitive block error rate performance. On the right side, what you are seeing is that actually you're seeing the block error rate performance of the chip for random linear codes, for CRC, for polar and CA polar, with a code length of 128 bits at different code rates. So just to emphasize, this is actually the first maximum likelihood decoding of random linear codes. And we also demonstrated the first hard detection maximum likelihood decoding of CA polar codes. There are a lot of soft detection decoders for CA polar codes, but this is the first hard detection maximum likelihood decoder. And then we also demonstrated first universal error correction of up to 3-bit flips for CRC codebooks. That means that now you can use your CRC codebook not only for error detection, but also for error correction, which performs almost as good as the other codebooks. And these measurements are showing the average latency and the measured energy with respect to frequency on the x-axis for different bit error rates for a BCH code in this example. And one important thing to emphasize here, latency and the energy efficiency performance is actually improved when the channel noise condition is better. So if you move to smaller bit error rates from 10 to minus 3 to 10 to minus 5, you see that the decoding performance improves. And the chip achieves 1 microsecond of average latency with a throughput of 122 megabit per second at a 30.6 picojoule per decoded bit from 68 megahertz of frequency and 1.1 volt supply for a bit error rate of 10 to the minus 3. 10 to the minus 5, sorry, just as a correction. So let's take a look at how is this performance compares to state of the art. So the first thing to emphasize is that the Grand decoder actually supports multiple communication standards simultaneously with no dead zones for instantaneous switching, while reducing the footprint and the energy costs associated with the decoding that when you use separate code-specific decoders. So here, we are supporting multiple code books, so it's a universal decoder. And we're doing this with very low power. So the chip consumes only less than 4 milliwatt of power compared to state of the art. And we have the lowest latency compared to other code-specific decoders. We are achieving 1 microsecond of latency, while being also able to provide security through code interleaving. We're able to rapidly change the random linear codes on the fly. And lastly, we are doing all of that with a small area. So we are able to support multiple codes at different rates without requiring multiple chips or without increasing the hardware area or the complexity. And we actually have a demo setup that actually demonstrates how this works in real time. We are using images here just to demonstrate the idea of information transfer. We use different code books to encode the input message. We add noise, and then we decode, and we demonstrate the performance of the chip in real time in terms of block error rate, in terms of average latency, and other performance metrics. So in this talk, we talked mostly about the hard detection decoder using Grand algorithm. But recently, actually last year, we just published our work on the soft detection decoder using a family, using an algorithm called OrbGrand from the family of Grand algorithms. And this work was published at the ASICs 2023. And just to emphasize, we demonstrated the lowest energy per bit soft detection decoder, which is consuming sub 0.8 picojoule per bit, while being able to, again, universally decode any code book, CA Polar, CRC, and with ultra low power below 5 milliwatt, while being able to configure for different code lengths and code rates. And on the right side, actually, what you're seeing is a performance landscape that's showing compared to prior fabricated decoders for energy per bit on the y-axis and on the x-axis with respect to throughput, and then we have the constant power lines. So it's you want to push for better energy efficiency, lower power, and higher throughput, and our work pushes the performance design trait space for the decoders while being able to support any code book for universal decoding. So we discussed two very different application areas with unique system requirements. And we talked about energy efficient chips that are recently designed by my group for ingestible bioelectronics and universal decoding. And hopefully I was actually able to convince you that even though these are very unique systems with different requirements, we need custom integrated hardware to make these solutions possible. And here actually are some of the other application-specific integrated circuits designed by my group or myself with my collaborators, bridging security, signal processing, and energy-efficient wireless communications. And of course, all of these work are very interdisciplinary. They require bridging biology or information theory with electronics, I have a lot of collaborators. I would like to acknowledge my collaborators from the bioelectronics work. You're actually seeing a picture of my student who designed the ingestible capsule work, who designed the ingestible capsule. We have a lot of collaborators from Boston University and MIT on these projects that are related to cyber secure biological systems that combines genetically engineered biological systems with integrated circuits. And for the grant project, I also have a lot of collaborators, again, from MIT, from information theory side, from Northeastern University, from the algorithm development side. And you're seeing my student who works on this project from the hardware side to develop the custom designed chips for the grant algorithms. Lastly, of course, but not least, of course, I would like to thank the White Circuits group, my students, for their hard work to make these research outcomes possible. And of course, without their contributions, none of these would have been possible. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Rabia, for this excellent talk. So I'm seeing no question yet in the chat channel. So please, if you have any question, do it as soon as possible. So have you also considered to implement your decoder as a part of a system on chip, let's say like a hardware accelerator for?
That's a great question. So we started with demonstrating the decoder itself in terms of the energy efficiency and the latency performance. Now we are moving towards more of a system implementation. So we are also looking at not just the decoder, but we are also co-designing the RF front end. So my group has a background in RF design too. So we are looking at RF front end techniques that's combined with this decoder to make the overall system more efficient. And we are also having some development to demonstrate these ideas at the system level using software-defined radios. Those are some of our next steps, yes.
Okay. So I have a question here by Professor Fernando Silveira from Uruguay. So Fernando is asking, well, first, thank you for the very nice talk. In the capsule, I think you use a sub-gigahertz link. Have you considered using BLE?
That's a great question. Yes, we are using a 900 megahertz for the communication. We have considered in the beginning using BLE, but we weren't sure, given that this is going to transmit from inside the body to cell phones, so we weren't sure how the link would be great. So we decided to actually stick to sub-gigahertz just to make sure that we have good efficiency in the transmission link. So we didn't try using BLE in this project.
Thank you. So I'm seeing no other question in the chat. So if someone has another question, please do it now. Well, I think we have no more questions. So thank you very much, Rabia, for this excellent talk. Congratulations for your project. So it's a very important one in a time that we need more and more low-power chips connected to do some medical, to cope with some medical problems and so on. So really nice work. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ricardo. And thank you for having me. It was a great pleasure to talk to everyone about our work. Thank you.
So before closing the session, just to inform you that soon we are going to announce the next CASS talks. And if you want to go to Uruguay, where Fernando Silveira is a professor, you still have 2 days to send papers to Iberchip, that the call for paper is still open. And then you can also use the opportunity to attend the LASCAS 2024 in Punta del Este. So bye-bye to all you and have a nice weekend.